Welcome to the State of the City for Murfreesboro government. Mayor Shane McFarland will join me in just a moment. There were a lot of things happening in the city in 2022. We added 2 new members to the Murfreesboro City Council. Some exciting redevelopment projects in the downtown area are in the works. A major entertainment venue has chosen Murfreesboro to be its home. The city is also looking at new and innovative ways to deal with solid waste, our roadways, and more. Speaking of new, Murfreesboro Parks and Recreation has a new facility to unveil very soon. So here to discuss everything that has been happening in Murfreesboro, City Mayor Shane McFarland. Mayor, it's good to see you.
Great to be here. I'm excited to talk about what's happening in the city of Murfreesboro.
Well, congratulations on another 4-year term in 2022. And of course, we're in a growing city with a lot of challenges, and that means infrastructure needs and cost. But there are, like you say, a lot of accomplishments. Things are moving forward, and we wanted to just discuss a number of those things that happened in 2022.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, you know how the city has grown, and as a city, I don't think we very often will, toot our own horn, and you get sort of busy with all the things that are happening, but you don't take time to let people know, hey, this is what occurred last year. And so I'm thankful for y'all. I'm thankful for our team here at the city to be able to sit down and, you know my personality. I'm definitely a more informal person, and, standing behind a podium and reading, a prepared speech for the state of the city is not me. And I like and I think people like that.
I agree.
I think people like being able to have more of a conversation and listen about what's happening. So thank y'all for the opportunity to do this.
You're welcome. It's good to have you. A community investment trust was one of the big things, and that took a lot of work in the legal department. There was some forethought with that. First of all, someone had to think through the idea of we're going to sell our electric distribution system so that we can have a long-term investment for the city.
Yeah, we made that decision 3 years ago to sell MED. We already had such a great partner in our community with Middle Tennessee Electric. They're one of our oldest corporate partners in Murfreesboro, based here in Murfreesboro. They serve all over the mid-state. And so it was a great fit to be able to make that decision, and the benefits that have transpired since that's happened. We set up a big trust, and that big trust, the proceeds that are going to come in, it's over $300 million just in the net proceeds. Now, what we're hoping, much like our pension, that will grow. And what we've been able to do is, outside of that other trust, we've set up a community investment trust. And that trust is set up to where we can help a lot of our service providers in the city that deal with homelessness, that deal with different things with children, like CASA. All these different organizations. So we set up, not only do we set up our community investment trust to manage the money, we set up another foundation group that actually will divest some of those funds to community partners. So I think 15 years from now, my goal, clearly I'm not going to be mayor in 15 years. I think the council is going to sit up and see this annuity that's being paid every year that benefits the taxpayers, so that we don't have to have the discussions about raising taxes, but also it invests our community partners who do so much in the city of Murfreesboro.
It's definitely an accomplishment. A lot of references have been made to the community, the Christy Houston Foundation, a community foundation that invests within the community. And so when you think of it like that, that's something that's going to benefit generations. When we're gone, there are people still benefiting from that.
Well, I put it this way. The Murfreesboro Electric Department, the city was getting about $3 million a year in payment in lieu of taxes. That number now could triple on what the city's getting, but just based on the annuity. And the major part with that, the liability of running an electric department is no longer there, and that means that we don't have to borrow money to build, office buildings, infrastructure, and those funds can just be set aside as almost a savings account for the taxpayer of Murfreesboro. That's a big deal.
And so people understand, some money was set aside, a small amount, like $3 or $4 million, to invest in some projects, I think, like the West Park and roads. But then decisions will be made going forward, but ultimately those two committees, the one on strategic partnerships and the other on how the funds are invested, will end up going to the council, and the council will make the final decision.
Yeah, a little different. There was a little more than 3 or 4 million that was set aside for projects. You know, what we did, we set aside money for West Park. That was about 5 million that we set aside. We had already set aside 3 or 4 million, so we've got about 8 or 9 million for West Park now that we don't have to borrow. And then we took about 15 million that we've set aside for road projects. And so those road projects include Old Fort Parkway, the bridge over Stones River, the bridge over 24. And what we can do with that money is typically TDOT will match our money anywhere 3 or 4 times. We conservatively figured that just we could leverage our money, we could double it. So what we're going to be able to do is take that money and double that to be able to push those road projects along. And so where that benefits the taxpayer, and all of us know this from running our own homes, anytime that we don't have to borrow money, that's a good thing. And so what this has allowed us to do is not only push projects through quicker, it's allowed us to be able to do that and not borrow money. But at the same time, one of the big concerns was that we would sell this asset in typical political style. We were going to spend the money as fast as we could. And what we have put in place is we have said that future councils can never spend into the principal of that money. And without going to a referendum or going back to the state of Tennessee and amending our charter. So it really has protected that money that, 50 years from now, our kids will be able to know that this is set aside in Murfreesboro to be able to benefit the taxpayer.
In the way you had to do it by going to the legislature and get approval for the change of the charter, I mean, these are things that implemented this kind of in stone.
Yes,
it's going to be hard to change it again.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
very rarely will you see local government go to the state and say, hey, we want to put more control on us, And I think that's what we did as a council, that we really said we want to make sure that if a future council comes in and maybe they have a different opinion with that money, that they can spend the dividends that come off of it. They can change how they want to spend that, but without truly going to a referendum inside the city, that money cannot be touched. And that's what we really felt like was the best way to not only protect the taxpayer, but to protect the city moving forward.
Let's talk about redeveloping downtown. There's this thought that you can't have a vibrant downtown without having a fully vibrant city. And so
Sure.
Even though the city of Murfreesboro is moving west, and some might argue that maybe the center of town is closer to I-24 than it is to downtown, you and others probably feel like we still need to redevelop downtown so it is the downtown we want to have.
Yeah, I've had my business downtown since 2008, and you look at the people that are on council, the majority of us work downtown. Councilman Wright, Councilman Averwater, of course, Councilman Shacklet, his photography business has been on the square for a number of years, as long as I can remember. So we all have a heart for the downtown, and I think if you look over the last 10 years, what has happened specifically with real estate and with people wanting to come downtown, it's really flipped to where downtown property is some of the hardest in Murfreesboro to find. I think the development is extremely important, but one of the things that, and it's tough for people who've lived in Murfreesboro all their lives to really grasp this, but people want to live downtown. And the biggest challenge that we have right now, there are very few rooftops downtown where people, and when I say the downtown proper, I'm talking about the square and maybe a couple of blocks off the square. You just don't have a lot of opportunity for people to be able to live there. And I think people want to do that now. They want to live where they can walk. They want to live where they can walk to their restaurants, maybe, be outside more. And so I think that's what we're really trying to focus on. And, at my heart, I appreciate all the businesses in Murfreesboro. And so, I get frustrated when people are saying, you should do a better job attracting national headquarters to come to Murfreesboro. And I'm like, well, we have lots of national headquarters in Murfreesboro. Every small business that is based here has their headquarters here. And so if you were to add up all the people in our community that are employed by small business owners, it greatly outpaces all of the other the large businesses.
Amazon,
Sure.
General Mills. So there are larger companies here.
Absolutely, and we are thankful for our partners, but at the same time, I mean, the true small business owner, we don't have the resources that a public company has. And so most of those businesses, if you look, that are downtown, they're not chain restaurants. Those are all, like Sean and Christy Hackinson with the Alley. You look at all of these different businesses, and they're families, they're small business owners. And so I think continuing to make sure that we invest back in the downtown, it creates a vibrant small business economy, which, gives that different niche that we can have in Murfreesboro. Like last night, my wife and I went and ate at the Alley. And
it's always busy.
Yeah, and so, we typically are there every Thursday night after we have a council meeting. We just go sit and have dinner. And so it's so cool to be able to frequent those small businesses. And look, I'm not getting paid by the Alley for advertising. I think there's lots of places that we can go visit downtown, but if we don't have a vibrant and a safe downtown, a lot of that feel in Murfreesboro goes away.
There's a number of projects that have been discussed for a number of years, but they're real close to really becoming visual.
Yeah.
The daylighting of Town Creek and then the realignment of Front Street. So let's talk about those.
Yes, so Town Creek has been something that we've talked about all the way going back to 2010, and that's where the corner of Church Street and Broad Street, there were some older businesses there, and back in the 70s, to talk about how things have changed. In the 70s, things were, hey, if there's a creek or if there's some kind of waterway, you want to close it off, pipe it in concrete, and no one wants to see it. And then, fast forward 50 years, some of those structures start failing, and you have to go in and dig everything up, and you have to replace it. So we have, as a council, made the decision that we're really daylighting Town Creek, an old concrete structure that we can bring back to where it's actually something that is fun, and it also is not an eyesore, but more of an amenity to the downtown.
And it will become like a park.
It is. It's going to be a park, almost like a greenway down the Broad Street area. And then, we've seen several plans come to the city council about some of the city property on Broad Street, a revitalization there with some retail space, some residential space, a boutique hotel, some office space. So I think you're really going to see this whole downtown corridor over the next 10 or 12 years will improve. We had the bottom study, and I think it was very beneficial. But one of the things that the bottom study just hasn't moved, and we haven't been able to attract people to invest in that area. And I think one of the main reasons is because there's no one who lives in that area. And so we've got to be able to mix, people, activity coming in with people living downtown, but we've got to be able to mesh that with traffic and all the other things that come along.
Of course, an example, if you look to Nashville, is like the Gulch. It was a warehouse district with railroads going through it, and then someone starts doing something, and then it all builds on itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example. Last Friday night, we went, and I say my wife and I went down, and we wanted to go see Adam Sandler. And so we just said, hey, we're going to stay down in the Gulch area. And so we stayed there for the night, went to a small restaurant, had dinner, and we walked everywhere. And you start looking around that whole area, and you look at the different complexes that are there where people live, and people are out walking their dogs. And I'm not saying that we want to turn downtown Murfreesboro into Nashville, but I do think that there is the ability to be able to provide some really cool different spots where, as you retire, you may want to live downtown.
So it becomes a destination.
Yeah.
And it is a Nashville company, right, that wants to invest
Correct.
on this Broad Street development. Where is that at?
Yeah.
Is it close to becoming?
Well, I think, a lot of those things are worked on at the administration and the staff level, and then they're brought to us. We met on that, and it was presented to us about 6 or 8 months ago, and we had a lot of different feedback that the council, Mike, I think one of the things, just like, the T word, taxes, we don't like to use that word. The A word doesn't like, that's apartments, are not people don't like to hear the apartment word. And I would agree that I think if I could go back 25 years ago and I had my magic wand, I think we would have made some different decisions regarding apartments in Murfreesboro, and more to not have them stretched out all over on the outskirts of the city. I think density needs to be more centrally located in areas where it's easy to provide services. And so I think it's hard to believe that a politician would say this. I think we've made some mistakes with those things. And that's really what we're looking at downtown is how do we provide affordable housing that people can actually afford to buy and it not all just be transient housing. And when I say transient housing, somebody who's going to stay somewhere for, a year and then they're moving somewhere else. So I think that's what we're trying to mesh downtown.
Other developments that are occurring are along Medical Center Parkway, the Notes Live Entertainment Complex, which is very exciting. A lot of people are really geared up for that. Apparently there's going to be some kind of ribbon cutting or groundbreaking soon. Yeah,
they're working on the groundbreaking on that. I think they're working through all of their financial data, and right now is a tougher time financially with inflation and interest rates at where they are. So what we're talking about, like with Notes Live, we're really trying to bring different things to Murfreesboro that, I think it would be great that I didn't have to drive to Nashville on Friday night to go see something. I mean, those offerings can be here in our community. And, we talk about traffic on I-24, being able to provide those services in Nashville or in Murfreesboro that you can get in Nashville. And I think that's one of the things with Notes Live that's going to be it's going to be great. Now, of course, we've had a lot. You've been at the meetings. We've had a lot of discussion about traffic on Medical Center Parkway. I was out there 3 times the last 2 days, and construction on Medical Center Parkway widening is going on right now.
And Clary Park, the new development, they seem to be moving very fast. I think it's an Atlanta company.
Yeah.
I mean, they took the grading quick, and then I think they're the ones adding that 3rd lane, so they were already building the curb. And not recently, I looked through there, and I think they're about ready to pour the pavement on that.
Yeah.
The council now meets fairly regularly at the airport. It's a new facility. It has a lot of amenities, and that's been something that was in the works for a number of years and is one of the accomplishments.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you this. I just, about 2 weeks ago, got my pilot's license. I've been working on that for about the last 18 months.
I saw the photograph with your trainer.
So I'm officially going to be the air mayor now, if that's okay. That's what I'd like you to know.
The air mayor?
Yeah. So the airport is something I am very proud of, and I don't think a lot of people understand the economic generator that the airport is for our community. But not only that, it's the activity that happens out there. So we were able to build a new I don't want to call it a terminal because we don't have commercial flights coming into Murfreesboro, so it's not like people are checking their luggage in there. But it's an FBO, which is a flight-based operation that's based out of there. And so if you've not been out to the airport, it's something that I know our team out there would love showing you what's happening out there.
Another big accomplishment, well, it's still in the works, of course, is the alternatives that the city is seeking on the Middle Point landfill. And the city is moving forward with the alternatives. And so I would like to hear more about, how soon the transfer stations, I think there's another name for them if you talk to Darren Gore, but why the decision was made to move forward like that.
I try not to let my blood pressure get up when we start talking about trash, especially with Middle Point. And I'm not going to go into all the legal stuff that we're dealing with at Middle Point right now, but I think we talk about decisions that we wish we could go back on, and I would like to think back in the late 80s, early 90s, that the decision that was made to allow, a super dump in Murfreesboro, I would like to think that decision would have been different, knowing where we are now. And so what we really have tried to do is to say that we're going to take the destiny of Murfreesboro. We're going to determine that on our own on how we're going to handle trash. And that there's nothing right about 70% of outside trash coming into Murfreesboro, and we are the ones left to deal with all the environmental issues that come with that. Ultimately, a new landfill going on their site that would double the size of the current landfill is just not acceptable to the city of Murfreesboro. It's not acceptable to the residents in Rutherford County. And it really is one of those things, Mike, that I think the cheap way is not always the best way. I mean, sure, we've saved money, I think, being able to dispose of our trash for free. But the long-term effects that we are going to be dealing with, in my opinion, far outweigh the money that we've saved. And that's why the council voted here about 45 days ago. We're spending about $2.8 million on developing the new transfer station, which is basically terminology that where all of the trash that we collect goes to one centralized location. It's warehoused in a smell-proof building, and then we've partnered with a company based in Morrison, Tennessee called Waste Away, where they can take that material, that MSW, which is municipal solid waste. They process that, and it has roughly a 90% ability to take all that trash. There's only about 10% with diversion that we can't recycle or we can't process, and it turns it into an alternate fuel source. And then we've even gone further where we now feel like that alternate fuel source can be used to produce natural gas that we in turn can put back on the pipeline. So
I think people would generally agree that Murfreesboro is a relatively conservative community.
Absolutely.
In a conservative county.
Yeah.
But this is a very progressive idea.
Yes.
To do this. And you've been candid, it's going to have costs. So there's going to be significant investment.
It is, but we feel like, I like to joke, and I've said this for years on WGNS or a lot of our shows, that there are many things in life that we can't guarantee. You always hear that, the only things that you can count on is death and taxes. And I think there's a third thing. Solid waste is not going to be free inside the city of Murfreesboro. It's just, it can't be. But I think we've got the opportunity to be able to make it as affordable as anything else inside our city. So, there's people in Smyrna and Laverne that are paying $25 to $27 a month for someone to come pick their trash up. The city of Murfreesboro, we charge $7.50 a month. And we're up to picking up now almost 50,000 cans per week. And so that nowhere comes close to subsidizing what it costs to run that operation. But I think we now have the ability, based on what we can bring in through the county and the cities in Rutherford County, we think we've got a really good opportunity that we can make this work, and it can be an affordable and an environmental alternative.
And new technology, of course, which Waste Away is a part of it with how we're collecting solid waste with Routeware, which is a new way to kind of verify that the trash is being collected.
We talk about our community. I mean, Mike, we're high-tech rednecks now. I mean, we've got it. Look, I'm real big on technology. I think that if there's an easier way to do something, why wouldn't we want to do that? And so now with Routeware, we can look at what's the best segments for us to pick up trash that benefits the taxpayer. What's the best way that when our trash truck comes to your home that they click a button to let our yard waste people know that, hey, there's limbs on the street that we need to pick up. And so I think by, the one service, and people don't realize this, we have got a great police department, great parks and recreation, great fire department. I mean, look at all the services that we have inside of our city. But what's the one service that every resident gets every single week?
Of course.
Absolutely. And I can guarantee you, when someone's trash doesn't get picked up, we're going to hear about it. And so I think that's something that's very important, that there's all of these other services that we have that get all of the sort of the credit, and they get all of the publicity about what they do. But solid waste is one of those departments that you just don't hear that much about. But in my opinion, it's one of the most departments inside the city that people rely on every single week.
Well, and the two things people complain about the most would be if they didn't have their trash picked up or there was a problem with it, or there's congestion and roads.
Sure.
And the other day, you had the engineer, Chris Griffith, who's the executive director of Public Works, gave a presentation. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were maybe 57 road projects on that list.
Yeah, there were 57, but there are 27 road projects that are currently under construction inside the city of Murfreesboro. 27. And out of those 27, I think 14 were state projects. So, I mean, you know, the sad fact is it takes so long to get a project through the pipeline. I was talking with Mayor Bragg yesterday, and Mayor Bragg was talking about, hey, where's Thompson Lane? Where are y'all on that? And I said, well, you know, we're on right-of-way acquisition, working with the state. He's like, you know, I was told when I was mayor that project was going to be done in 2016. So that's 7 years ago. And it just sort of goes to prove I'm really excited about the governor's new road plan, that their number one priority is being able to fast track state road projects to be able to get those road projects completed quicker. And you know, as a city, we're a little more nimble than the state government, and we're able to complete road projects quicker. And you're seeing that throughout our city with our hotspot programs that we're doing, like, you know, Haynes Drive and Sulphur Springs was an example.
Chafin Lane.
Chafin Lane is one that we're doing right now. Robert Rose and Thompson Lane, where Robert Rose came into Thompson Lane. We're able to do those as a city, and we're now identifying what we call hotspots to be able to go and fix those. So, you know, I think I'm excited. You know Chris Griffith. I mean, Chris is a rock star inside the city about moving forward and creatively working on road projects, and I think that's something that you're seeing our council. We've always put a priority on road projects. 75% of our borrowing that we do is all related to transportation and road projects.
And visually, you're seeing it happen. I mean, it's a TDOT project, but Highway 99, that a lot of that is finished. They're still working on some of it. Brinkley Road has a new bridge going up for the Blackman High School students. The one we talked about on Medical Center Parkway widening is going up. But one that a lot of people are concerned about, at least over in that the Medical Center area, is the Asbury Lane.
Yes.
And that's getting closer. You're seeing something going on there.
Yeah, that's been a really that's been a really touchy one. We've worked really hard with the family that owns the Grove farm out there, and so, you know, Mike, I'm a country guy. I grew up in Mont Eagle. I grew up in mainly a very rural area, and so I'm very understanding of the farming aspect.
And it's part of our character. I think people appreciate that.
Yeah. But the tough thing with the Grove, for example, is that's in our busiest commercial area in the city of Murfreesboro. And so Asbury Lane, that interchange right there, there's no other way to describe it as it's just a disaster. And so what we're wanting to do is completely close off that
the road that
connects,
Medical Center.
And that has to be routed through the Williamson property, and Conference Center Drive would connect back into Asbury, and then also in conjunction with the widening of Wilkinson Pike.
Is that what they're in the process of doing now, or is that separate from that? It seems like that's what they're doing.
That's separate.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, we've not started the process of realigning Asbury and the widening of Wilkinson.
So
Pike.
the road that is occurring in there is all the private roadway that they're creating, which is improvement.
It is. The council voted back in August to proceed with the design on actually through that farm, and so it's like anything else. You know, we really like to work with the property owner to be able to make it work for everyone. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But I don't think anyone can argue that Asbury Lane interchange is a really dangerous intersection that we've got to be able to address.
A major development that's been years in the working, which is the relationship that the City Parks Department has with the Tennessee State Soccer Association, which I know you are akin to because you have boys that have played soccer for a number of years. We now see the visual aspect of the indoor soccer facility.
Yeah, I mean, I'm extremely proud of what's happened at Siegel. And really I think this is more, you know, Mike, it's after the years of doing this, I think you end up losing your political filter. And I think it is extremely important in our community to have a vibrant parks and recreation system. And you know, there are people out there that are like, well, I don't use the soccer complex, or I don't use the baseball complex, or I don't use the Greenway. Why do we have them? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of things in this community that you may use that I don't use. But I am passionate to be able to say that if you don't give kids an opportunity to do something, they're much less likely to get in trouble when they are on the ball fields as opposed to not being on the ball fields. And then, you know, at the same time, all of us have played some type of organized sport. I mean, whether it's at church or whether it's in a league, and being part of an organized team teaches you how to interact and play well with others. I mean, there's no doubt you look at people who have been associated with some kind of team building in a sports environment, they're better teammates than those who've never learned how to work well with others. And so I say that for soccer, that in baseball, and you look at West Park and those things that we're working on, that Murfreesboro has, way before me, put a priority on parks and recreation. And I think that's something that is in the fabric of our community, that it's not something to be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of.
Well, I think you can make an argument that a lot of the reason why people are attracted to our city, and they're coming from everywhere, you know, congestion is an issue.
Yeah.
But the reason why it's an issue is because people want to live here, and part of that is the park system and the Greenway system.
I completely agree. You know, you look at Siegel Soccer Complex, and from the taxpayer standpoint, we did spend money on turf, you know, putting turf on 9 of the fields out there. We built the indoor area. But one of the things that when you put, you know, pencil to pad, the amount of money that we spent on turfing those fields, that means that we don't have to mow them. That means we don't have to fertilize them. That means that we don't have to do the thatching every year that we have to do. That also means that, you know, we were having to close those fields from October to February. So there's about 5 or 6 months of the year that you couldn't use the fields. And so now we've got it set up to where you can use those fields year round.
And that's probably going to be an attraction factor on the part of these larger associations wanting to come here, because they know when they do come here that they're going to be able to play, and
Sure.
there's not going to be a delay or a postponement.
Well, my kids are senior. My older boys are seniors this year, and they played. It's funny because half the time I feel like that I'm running in circles. So last night I went to Siegel Soccer Complex because the boys had a match at 6 o'clock. And so I text my mom, who comes to all their games. I'm like, hey, Mom, where's the game? And she's like, oh, it's at Riverdale. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm at Siegel, and clearly I'm on the wrong side of town. But last night, there was probably 200 kids. They were not matches. I mean, these are 200 kids inside the city of Murfreesboro in different associations or teams that were practicing out there last night. I would argue that's a good thing.
Yeah. The West Park, we alluded to that a little bit, but where do you see that? Because a lot of people in the West End have been wanting a park for a while, and then it got changed, of course. But the accomplishment is the land swap occurred with MTE, so that's finished.
Yeah,
and now it's designing the park.
And
right?
not many people know, I'm real slow to take credit on things, but my wife and I were walking 18 months ago. This was a year ago, November, and we were talking about West Park, and we were talking about the challenges that the piece of property we had next to 840. It's just, I mean, it was the only property we could find. Not great for a park. I mean, typically you don't see parks next to an interstate. And so she was like, you know, she was really challenging me to be able to say, well, there's got to be some other alternatives. And so that's when we came up with the idea of, well, Middle Tennessee Electric has 153 acres that is prime parkland. It's surrounded by neighborhoods. It's on Veterans Parkway. It has great access. And then the piece of property that we had is more commercial property. And so Craig and I, Tyndall and I went and met with Chris Jones. I was like, hey, Chris, I got a crazy idea. We've got 119 acres that is got surrounded by 4 roads. Its access is much better for a commercial type application like what you guys have on Veterans Parkway, but you're surrounded by neighborhoods. So wouldn't it make sense if we looked at interchanging those? So it took us about a year to go through that process. And in December of this past year, we voted and we acquired their 153 acres. They took our 119 acres. And now we truly can start the process to be able to start a community park, which is what we're doing.
I'm sure you probably asked the question already, but realistically, when will we see a park there?
The wheels of government turn slow.
It's true. It takes time.
It does. And we all have regrets. And I think, and I've been very upfront about this, I think it's a mistake, and it's something that I'm very disappointed that over the years I've been on council that we've not been able to get something on the west side of town. I think it's something that, I think we can rectify. And so what my goal is, and what I was actually just told this morning, in 2 weeks they're coming to the council with an agreement on who's going to be the designer for the park. And then that will take another 2 or 3 weeks to be able to go through and get sort of a program plan for what they would like to see there. And then, my hope is by the end of this year, we should be able to have the process to be able to start construction over there. That's an aggressive timeline, but I do think either this year or next year you'll start seeing dirt moving in that facility. We already have $8 million set aside, so we've got the money there to be able to do something.
A sign of progress, so it's moving
Yes.
forward. A lot of communities have been resistant of body cameras for police, but some have said, yeah, we're going to do that, especially in light of the climate that we've gone through in the last 2 or 3 years. Murfreesboro police decided to move forward with it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Your younger officers, I think, who are used to more technology, were all like, no, we want body cameras. And I do think it's if you're not doing anything you're not supposed to be doing, then body cameras are it's a no-brainer, right? And so I think what's happened is, and I think our police officers and our entire MPD team are, in my opinion, the best that you will find. A lot of the things that you see happening in other communities you don't see happening here, and I think it's because of the type of people that we've tried to hire, and that Mike, we have really over the last 8 years made it a priority that we, whenever things were happening nationally with other police departments, and you heard, I'm not trying to make this political, but you would hear this defund the police. We made a different decision where we said, no, we want to fund our police because we don't want to be hiring people that are not good for our police department. We want to be able to attract the brightest and best. We don't want other communities to poach our good officers. And so that's what we've done. I mean, our police pay, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I want to say our police pay has gone up 50% over the last 8 years. I think you have to do that. I mean, and it's just a fact now. You see what's happening nationally, you see what's happening on the news, and you also see what the stress that a police officer is under. Who wants that job now? So it is a very tough job to be able to fill, and you have to make sure that the people who are in those positions not only are being financially rewarded, but I think emotionally that we've put in action our mental service providers that are going around with our police officers to be able to help in domestic and different type of situations. So you've got to be able to give them the resources. The body cameras have in turn, I think they're not seen now as, hey, we're trying to catch you doing something. It's almost seen as a protection that we know our officers are going to do the right thing, so we want to have something on them to protect what's happening in the environment that they're in.
Was this an issue that the chief of police and the police department felt like they wanted to do, or did there have to be any kind of city influence on?
No,
on that
I mean,
decision?
Mike, I think what you see, and you've heard me say this before, I think whenever politicians get involved in service delivery decisions, we typically are going to screw it up or make it tougher. And so that was not a push from the city council that we wanted to see that happen. That was something that the police chief was bringing forward to say in our city administration team, that they were saying, we want to do this to protect our officers, not only our officers, but we also want to be able to do this to protect our residents and the general public. And so I think it's something that they were not reluctant at all to do this. There was a process to go through, including how it works with the district attorney to be able to make sure that you protect all those records as they're digitally stored. But I can tell you this: I've not had one officer who has complained to me about having their cameras now. I think it's just something that's, look, we live in a world now that you're being filmed,
anyway, all
yes.
the time.
You see someone with a camera and that's the world we live in.
Everywhere you go, you're
yes.
being videotaped.
So I think that's just something that, as technology has increased, it's just things we've become more used to.
The other thing that in the public safety realm that is an issue that's every community seems to be dealing with, especially out west, but it's the homelessness issue.
Yes.
And they have a task force. I don't know if that's the direction that the city is going more with the police and the task force,
yep.
or, I know there's other issues like community development that
yes.
is working on that as well.
Yeah. I had a really good meeting yesterday with Greenhouse Ministries. They're one of our long-time homelessness advocates in the city of Murfreesboro. They just got finished building a new transitional house, and it was a really good conversation that this is not going to be probably politically correct to say this. There are a lot of people in our community that are homeless that want the help of those organizations. And then there are some individuals in our community that are homeless that don't want help. They just want you to leave them alone.
It's true.
And I think that group hurts the other group that is really wanting to be able to get help.
And to move from homelessness to living in a home.
The term is transitional homelessness. They don't want to be homeless, but maybe a life event happened that made them be in that situation. So the goal is to move to transition to something else, and that's what Greenhouse Ministry is doing. And they were really clear with me yesterday to say, Shane, there's a segment of that population that you're not going to be able to help. My office is downtown, and I had a gentleman the other day that was doing something on one of the buildings next to me that he shouldn't have been doing. And when I was like, hey, man, you can't do that. And he got really aggressive with me for something that you and I would be arrested if we did
right.
that. Right. And so I think what we're going to have to do, and Mike, this is something you and I have talked about, and it's really concerning to me because we've had to do things here at City Hall that we typically wouldn't ever have done. For example, I think there's been a big talk about the library that, we constantly hear from our residents that they don't feel safe going to the library anymore because it's turned into a day homeless shelter. And I think that is fair for the resident to say, hey, that's not what the use of the library should be for. And so I think what we've got to do, and this is what, maybe I'm naive with this, we have got to do everything that we can to support those organizations that are really dedicated to helping people get to a different situation than they're in right now. And then we also have to define that, there's this other group that maybe we need to have the hard discussion to say, look, you can't live on the Greenway. You can't live at City Hall, but find different alternatives that we can work through those things. And Mike, I say that I don't want anyone to think that, I'm being unsympathetic or trying to be heartless, but the issue that we run into as a city, and I would tell the homeless advocate, put yourself in our shoes, that if someone comes to the library, it's state law, right? We don't let sex offenders around children, right? That's state law. Well, if you can't verify someone that's around story time or children all the time, then that puts the city in a very precarious legal situation if something did happen. Can you imagine being the parent that something happened to a child and we didn't have the things in place to be able to fix that?
So there are public safety issues, like you were saying, in the Greenway, and then, you know, if you err on the side of one, you end up having a problem on the other. So
yes, and it's just like when I first was elected 10 years ago, I was naive and I thought, I'm going to come in and I'm going to find a way that we can fix the homeless issue in Murfreesboro. And the more that I met with all of these groups, it became apparent that there's different opinions across the board on how you do it.
it's a complex issue.
Some people are like, hey, you just leave them alone and let them do whatever they want to. And I would argue with you, I've read so many articles now about San Francisco and the amount of people who are small businesses that are leaving San Francisco because of the homeless situation that's there. Or, I read an article a week ago about Chicago that, that the homeless had invaded the O'Hare Airport, the ticketing counter, and now that they were trying to fix that. And so there has to be a good balance that we're compassionate, but at the same time that the homeless advocates understand that the city cannot just allow no holds barred to do whatever someone wants to do. I mean, you've always heard that saying that your right is to punch someone ends at my nose, and so we can't do something that will hurt the overall public.
One last issue I wanted to address was, and this is part of the growth issue, is that as you're growing and you're having infrastructure needs for roadways, you also have that for sewer capacity and water. And there are limits. I mean, there's limits to the water that we have here. I guess you can continue to maybe take from Percy Priest, but then that becomes a capacity issue. But you have made significant investments in the water infrastructure.
Yeah, and it's a very complicated process that not a lot of people like to talk about. I mean, I tell when I speak, the favorite thing I get to do is go speak to elementary school kids. And I routinely will ask them, hey, what happens when you flush the toilet? And they cannot tell me what happens when they flush the toilet, where it goes. And so it's a very detailed process that we're so fortunate in our Murfreesboro Water Resources Department that there's people a lot smarter than me and you who manage that
It might be out of sight, out of mind for us, but it's not for them.
No, and I think that's something that the City Council over the last really 10 years, and you can't go into all the legal part. I mean, we could sit here for 2 hours and just talk about zoning and property rights, but really what we had to look at is what the sewer capacity is a finite resource, and what does that really go to? And so we've really looked at, not necessarily from zoning, but more a capacity that this is how many units that we will allow to be developed. And all of our wastewater goes back to the Stones River, or it ends up going to irrigation and effluent, being able to irrigate the Gateway or Old Fort Golf Course. So ultimately, you've got to do something with it. And as we grow, that's going to be a big issue moving forward. But I'm not confident of a lot of things, but I am more confident in our Murfreesboro Water Resources Department that we are heading in the right way to be proactive on how we handle all of that.
How much pressure is there from developers that obviously development and housing is an important part of the economy here?
Sure.
So they want to be able to develop new housing, but if the infrastructure capacity isn't there, because I know Darren's working all kinds of different ways to increase that. But
I think if it were up to the development community, there would be a lot less regulation than what there is. I'm probably on the opposite end, that I think it's one of those things you just can't have a no-holds-barred approach.
And you're a developer.
I am, and I tell people this, that they think that I'm, an advocate on letting development do whatever they want to, and you'll watch me on TV. And one of the council members the other day, he was telling me, he's like, hey, I'm a new council member, and all these people will come up to me and they'll be like, that McFarland guy, he's a developer. He's always going to side with the development community. And the council member said, I've been up here with him for 6 months now, and he's probably tougher on them than anybody who sits up there. And it's just because I've done this so long that I know the developer speak, when I can really look at them and say, I've heard that before, that's not the way it works. And so I think there's a compromise. What a lot of people don't realize, most of the roads and infrastructure that's built inside the city of Murfreesboro is done by the private sector. So the house you live in right now, the infrastructure that was put in the ground to support your house was paid for by a developer. And they give that back to the city of Murfreesboro. So there's definitely I think a compromise that we all work together. But we've really had to say that we're going to do things differently than we did 20 years ago. And it's tougher here in the city now, which I don't apologize for. I think you look at the product that we have in the city now and the things that we're getting in the city, it's because we have increased our design guideline standards. I think there's going to be a discussion very soon about impact fees inside the city. So I think that's a discussion. But I mean, growth doesn't pay for itself. It just doesn't. And so I think now finding creative ways that we don't penalize the taxpayer for the growth that comes across, that's what we're working on.
For all the complaints that people might have about congestion and growth, the city continues to win awards or get highly ranked in a number of areas, both
Sure.
economically and growth-wise, and then and basically the amenity of living, the way of life here. One that the city receives every year, and it's recently received for the 24th year, is financial reporting.
Yes. I'm an accountant. I mean, that's my
Your background in
yeah,
college.
my background is, even though I'm in the construction industry, my wife will tell you that my love language is a spreadsheet. I mean, our financial state of the city is the best that it has ever been. Now, I'm very concerned. We've seen 2 consecutive months where our sales tax revenue did not meet what we budgeted. So I think that's extremely concerning.
Because the Federal Reserve is trying to lower inflation.
Yeah, I don't know how that correlates to what we're spending, what we're buying. I just know December, we met our budget. January, February, we've not met our sales tax revenue budgets.
The projections that we have.
The projections, right. We have, for the net year, we're $56,000 up. But I'm really going to be interested to see I was saying our December and January numbers were down. We haven't seen our February numbers yet.
And we're in a fiscal year that ends June 30th.
Correct. So I'm interested to see what our February numbers, if we don't meet our sales tax revenue forecast for 3 months in a row, I think that brings significant concern. But I mean, last year, Mike, we put over $60 million in our rainy day fund, and it really is 2 factors. That's we collected more than what we budgeted, mainly through sales tax revenue, and then we also spent less than what we budgeted. So those are 2 good things, collect more and spend less. And so our rainy day fund, which we call our fund balance, that's over $111 million now. To put that in perspective, when I first was elected 9 or 10 years ago, that number was about 27 million. So, that's not because of me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think as a council, we are fiscally conservative on how we spend money, and our staff is too.
So this says if something really happened, we had that downturn, we would have something to rely on to get us through that period.
Yeah, we've almost got, you hear Dave Ramsey talk about a rainy day fund. We've got about 7 months that if the city didn't collect another penny, we could operate our city for 7 months on just what we've saved up. And I think where that is very important is by having that reserve. That also means that, I think you have to average out the good years and the bad years. So what you'll see most governments, when they have a bad year, they raise taxes. And I don't foresee us having to do that, because if you average out, we're going to be in pretty good shape. And I think that's something that we should be able to continue to move forward with.
Companies like Smart Asset and Wallet Hub are those companies that, they're into finance, but they also do rankings. And the city of Murfreesboro is fared pretty well in some of those rankings. But recently,
well, Mike, we're number one. I mean,
yeah, we're number one in a lot of things.
That's right. Yeah.
But one of them that you pointed out yourself not too long ago, and I noticed it was different. But Murfreesboro ranked number one by Smart Asset in African American business.
Yeah, I'm proud of that. You know, I think what it goes to show is that, you know, I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. Murfreesboro is a welcoming place.
It's diverse, more diverse than what people might say.
You know, it's a diverse city. You go all the way back to 2017 when we had a group that wanted to come in that definitely did not, you know, come in to speak, that did not fit what I think the values of our city.
You're referring to the rally.
Yes, and it gave us the opportunity to be able to say, hey, that's not who we are as a community. And so you look at people, you look at, you know, Kurt Wade on our council, Madeline Scales Harris, that we don't ever look at one segment. You know, I say this routinely. I don't ask you what your political preference is when we go pick your trash up. I don't ask you what your religion is. I don't ask you, you know, what your ethnicity is. That's not how we operate in this city. And I think by leading from the top down to let people know we don't do that. And we want everyone to be treated fairly and get the same services inside the city, no matter who you are. I was extremely proud when Mr. McDonald, Dr. McDonald sent me that showing that, you know, Murfreesboro ranks number one in the country for African Americans starting a business. But I would tell you, it's not just African Americans. I think you look at where we rank financially, demographics, household income, our GDP growth. Murfreesboro has continued to outpace most every single city in the country. And so, you know, Mike, I get really, you know how active I am on social media. I think we have to do that now as a political official, that, you know, you have to be active on all the social media mediums to be able to get communication and feedback. You know, City TV 3 is, you know, you look at the talks we did during COVID and you look at how we've tried to be proactive on engaging our community. You a lot of times get focused on the negative. You know, no one comes to a city council meeting to tell you you're doing a good job. No one gets on my Facebook page or Twitter feed to tell me, hey, Mayor, you're doing a great job.
Human nature is the negative.
Yeah, they typically are getting on there to tell me I suck, or that, you know, that was a stupid decision. And so you get weighed down in all the negative that you don't get a lot of times to do what we're doing now and to really look and say, hey, this is where we are as a city. And I'll tell you this, I think most good leaders have a healthy sense of insecurity, you know, because, and it's just the way I was raised. And I tell my boys this, hey, if you're not working hard, I guarantee you the person you're trying to compete against, they're working hard. And that's something I think as a city that, you know, hopefully I've tried to stress in our government is that, you know, you can't just look back and say, we did really good on that one. All right, let's take a break. Because you don't get that opportunity. And I think that makes you tired quite a bit. But I think that's also one of the reasons why Murfreesboro succeeded, is because we just don't, you know, beat our chest to say we did really good on that. We just, you know, my favorite show, I watch it once a year, is West Wing. I watched the whole series. This year, I finished on January 28th, the entire series. You know, so when I work, I'll listen. And so my favorite thing that Martin Sheen does with President Bartlett, and this may be a good way to end our segment.
I assume you don't want to aspire to the West Wing.
No. He said he'll always say, what's next? And, you know, we may have a good win, and then my word's going to be, what's next? So that way, I think as a city, we're always looking to say, yeah, it's great, we did well on that one, but what's
There's
next?
always another challenge coming around the corner.
That's exactly right.
Thanks for sharing the accomplishments with us in 2022.
Absolutely.
And congratulations on becoming a pilot.
Hey, I'm excited.
That's good.
Onward and upward. Blue skies up is what they say.
Thanks, Mayor, for
All
being
right.
with us.
Thank you, Mike. Good to see you.
Good to see you.